Hey everyone, before we get going, if you find the information in this video has helped you or you think it will help someone else, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share with those who are looking for more apologetics with bite, unaffected by the twitteries of niceness culture. Don't forget to ring the bell so you're notified when new videos drop, and be sure to follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and X for more insights and to potentially chat with me on a live panel. If you're one of those who disagrees with what I brought up, or just to generally want to do something other than hate watch finally, scan the QR code and send me an email to get a discussion set up. And now, without further ado... At this point, I can't help but wonder if creedalists will use a dog barking in order to justify their traditions. Continuing on with a string of Catholics that have come onto my panels lately, this one in particular seems to have gone off the rails when it comes to, well, what's actually in the biblical text in order to justify the papacy, claiming that Acts 15 somehow confirms Peter as Pope?
Anyway, Fidelis, or Fide, excuse me.
Hello.
How are you?
Good. How about you?
Doing all right. Just for, I have two quick questions here. They're just more housekeeping stuff. One, are you over the age of 18? For TikTok purposes.
Yeah, I am.
Okay, cool. And then, what is your religion? I think I can gather based on your name, but I just want to make sure.
I'm a Catholic.
Catholic. Okay, cool. All right. Which one of these three do you want to tackle?
The Trinity.
Alrighty.
All right. Let me pull up my reasoning here for refuting the Trinity not being biblical.
Okay. So much pomp.
All right.
So here, let me kind of put my reasoning out there as you're kind of going through this on your computer there. I'm looking at this through the lens of someone from the first century, where these texts would have been written. I do not find the Nicene, the Chalcedonian, or the Athanasian conception of the Trinitarian notion, the Trinitarian concept within those texts. I don't find, a lot of the times the common proof texts leave out the Holy Spirit. There's, a lot of times they are shown as three separate entities, three separate beings. And often in order to make the concept work, much of the verbiage has to be changed within its context. So I'll just as a preemptive strike here, John 10, where Jesus says, "I and my Father are one," uses the same word in Greek and the same verbiage, and therefore we can only assume the same context that he uses in John 17 when describing his relationship with the disciples. So,
okay. So as a Mormon, you do, I haven't really gone much into Mormonism, but you do submit to the fact that the Bible is the Word of God.
Yes, do I think it's perfect? No.
Okay.
The Bible is the Word of God, but it is not perfect or infallible.
Okay, I obviously disagree with that, but I understand your belief now. So, I'm going to just begin with Deuteronomy 6:4, which says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one."
Mm-hmm.
So this is stating the Lord is one. Now, if we go into Isaiah 45, 5-7, we see, "I am the Lord, there is no other. Apart from me, there is no God. I will strengthen you, though you have not acknowledged me, so that from the rising of the sun to the place of its setting, people may know there is none besides me. I am the Lord, and there is no other. I form the light and create darkness. I bring prosperity and create disaster. I, the Lord, do all these things. So, the Lord in this is clearly stating that there is no other gods. There's no other gods other than him, other than
For
the one
Israel.
God that is
For
talking.
Israel. For Israel.
So what do you mean by that?
Okay, so I wanna go back to when you read the Shema in Deuteronomy 6:4, right?
Mm-hmm.
In Hebrew, there are multiple words that can mean one. What is the Hebrew word that is used for one in the Shema?
I couldn't tell you.
It is ehad. Now, there's another Hebrew word which also is rendered into English as one, which is yachid. Now, ehad, the times that we see it being used is like the first time we see it being used is in reference to Adam and Eve, that they are one flesh, they are ehad flesh. But however, the other times that we see something rendered into one in the English from Hebrew, yachid, it's sometimes rendered as one or single or only, and that would be like, for instance, when referring to the angel telling Abraham to sacrifice his one or his only son Isaac. So why would the Shema use ehad and not yachid?
I honestly I couldn't tell you. However, if you look at the Greek word used for it, it is his.
And it's
Which
the
is
same. It's the same one that Jesus uses in John 10 and John 17.
And it is the singular masculine form. The
Yeah.
singular masculine form.
Again, it's the same thing. So if we were to take that same attempt across the entire board as far as the Greek is concerned, then like if especially if we were to apply the same context, because again, Koine Greek is the same as Hebrew. There are multiple words that would be rendered as into multiple single words in English. So there are several words that would mean one in English, for instance, for both Koine Greek and for Hebrew. So why then every other time that we see, for instance, the word his or hen, which would be either or, in this case it would be the same type of context, why would we see it be used in a relational sense in John 17, but in an ontological sense in John 10, for instance? Or what you're trying to assert would mean in Deuteronomy 6.
So can you
Where
tell me
do
what
we
it
where do we
says
see
in
that?
John 10 and John 17?
Yeah, so I brought it up earlier. So in John chapter 10, Jesus tells the Pharisees, "I and my Father are one." And then in John 17, he uses the same verbiage, same context in Greek, where he prays to the disciples in verses 20 through 22 that the disciples would be one with him, Jesus, as Jesus is with the Father. So, if we are to take that into the same context, especially since it is the same word and it's used in the same way, why does it all of a sudden change meaning? Especially when there are other words that would mean something that would be an ontological entity.
Hey, my brother. Sorry to interrupt. I just got to bounce, but I'll talk to you later.
All right, sounds good.
So can you ask me your question again that you have for me?
Yeah. So where do we see that change in the context of the word when in every other instance, except for those proof texts that you're trying to bring up, it means something relational, not ontological?
So the word he's actually isn't used in John, and at least isn't used in John 17. It's actually hen is actually what's used. And so clearly the Greek word that's being used in that is
That
different.
would be the plural.
Well, clearly the
So
Greek
what
word
would
in that
be
is
what would be
okay.
what
So
would
that
be
is the plural.
does the meaning hold on. So the plural, does the meaning of the word change if it's in singular or plural?
Yes, it
Does
does.
the meaning change?
It would in this,
No,
it
it
would in
doesn't.
this situation debating monotheism.
Okay, here's the issue with this. The Mosaic Hebrews and the first temple Hebrews were not strictly monotheistic. Not in the way that we're claiming here. And not only that, but nor did they believe in any kind of Trinitarian notion.
Wait, so in which century?
Take your pick. The Trinitarian notion, like trying to read a 4th century Trinitarian concept into anything prior to the coming of Jesus, is anachronistic.
I don't understand why, because clearly Ignatius of Antioch in the 2nd century, a very influential church father, clearly affirmed the Trinity in the writings in his writings in worship.
Yeah, but was his concept of the Trinity the same as Athanasius and that of the Nicene or Chalcedonian creeds, or Chalcedonian councils? Excuse me.
Well, obviously, probably not in their entirety, because this is pre
Not
the
at all.
Council of Nicaea.
Not at all. If we're being honest and we actually read what Ignatius said, especially after Tertullian coined the term, it's not at all.
So what did Ignatius say on the Trinity then?
Basically, there were 3 in their unity, but not in body or being. What I'm looking for is something that would, because the Trinitarian dogma was not codified until the 4th century. Would you disagree with that?
No, because it was at the Council of Nicaea in 325.
Okay, so we're looking for something that even the ancient Hebrews would agree is indicative of what the Council of Nicaea would have dogmatized. So by trying to pull up something from the Old Testament when the ancient Hebrews did not believe that is anachronistic. And you're reading something into it that they did not believe.
But I don't know why that matters. If the word of God says
because the time in
the
which
Lord
they
is
written,
one.
but again, one how. That's the issue is that we're coming across here is one how. The ancient Hebrews, especially in the Mosaic era, like up until the first temple and even after the first temple, they did not believe they were not strict monotheists. In fact, that strict monotheism didn't come about until after the Babylonian exile.
I don't quite understand what you're trying to say.
I'm saying that they believed in a pantheon of gods, but only worshipped one. The Dead Sea Scrolls, for instance, in Deuteronomy 32 of the Dead Sea Scrolls translation, points to the fact that, especially with what we have currently in most Bibles, especially if they're based off the Masoretic text, which is very inaccurate. If we were to look at Deuteronomy 32, it would say that the children of Israel were divided according to the number of the sons of God. However, the Masoretic text, which is what has been traditionally used for several centuries, said that they were divided according to the sons of Israel, Bnei Elohim versus Bnei Israel. So, if we're going to go off of that, then the very concept of there being just a singular entity does not work within the historical context. So, if you're trying to read in a 4th century pagan Hellenistic philosophy into it, again, that's anachronistic because that's not what they would have believed at the time. We have to be willing to read it as it was given to the audience that it was given to, not read something into it that was applied centuries later.
I mean,
at least not without prophetic authority.
I mean, sure, it was centuries later, but you can bring the fact that, less than 300 years is not a long time.
Actually, it is.
From when Christ died. Clearly, I would have to say that the information that they were receiving at the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD and what was being passed down to them, because we know not everything was in the Bible.
Right, so and we would agree with that. Not everything is in the Bible. Here's the thing. Do you think that Paul or Peter would have recognized the church at Nicaea had they been there?
Yeah, I think they would have.
No, there's not a single scholar that would agree with that. Even Catholic scholars would disagree with that.
And why?
Because the things that were taught by the apostles were vastly different than what was upheld by the bishops, those almost 4 centuries later.
Can I get an example?
Well, I mean, we were just talking about it with the Trinitarian doctrine, right? Also, the concept of transubstantiation, they didn't teach that in the first century church. There's no record of that
Yeah,
even
they definitely
existing
did.
after that. Can you point to anywhere within the first century, anything that would have suggested that they believed in transubstantiation?
Okay, at the Last Supper, transubstantiation literally happened.
So Jesus
Clearly.
literally turned the bread into his flesh,
Yes.
or turned his flesh into bread and his blood into wine. He
Yes.
literally did that. Okay,
He
where does
did.
it say that in the text? Where does it say that? At the Last
Because
Supper.
he
Where
doesn't
did
say
he do
that.
that?
He doesn't say this. This represents my body, or this represents my blood. No, he said this
Yeah, but the
is
text does
my
not
body.
still the text does not the text says that he just took bread and break it and said, "This take, eat, this do in remembrance of the body which has been broken for you." That's what he
Okay,
says in Luke.
but we just said not everything is in the Bible.
Sure.
And also
But
not
this
everything in
goes
the Bible is going to be.
right. But this plays more into our point that Scripture was never meant to end. It was never meant to close. Neither was public revelation meant to end.
Yeah, and you also want first century.
Well, what I'm looking for is something that can be verified by either the apostles themselves, because like even you would have to agree there is a hierarchy to the church, is there not?
Yes, there 100% is.
Okay, so were the bishops equal with the apostles?
Yes,
Where do we
completely.
get that? Where do we get that indication from the apostles themselves?
Apostolic succession,
No, I asked from the apostles.
and that does come from the apostles.
Where?
We
Where do we
see
see that?
we
Where
see
where do we
in
see
the
where do we see a writing from an apostle, either Peter, James, John, or whomever was considered an apostle of Jesus Christ in the first century that would state that the bishops were equal in their authority?
okay, yeah, not everything is said straight up. If you're looking for everything to be said straight up,
These are
Mormonism,
verifiable claims that ought to be verified, and
yeah,
these are the apostles were mortal men, and they would have been able to say, yes, these are our successors. Yes, this is the way that the doctrine is supposed to go. Yes, this is the way that the church is meant to be run. And yet we see nothing for that. All we
and
see are
they did
claims.
because they gave
We see
Judas a
all
successor.
we see all we well, yeah, because he was ordained to the apostleship, Matthias was. And we also see what we see as far as apostolic succession is concerned is that there are new apostles called and set apart and numbered with the apostles. The bishops were not numbered with the apostles.
I don't
In
know
fact,
what you
we
mean
like
by that.
so after Matthias, we know that Matthias was called an apostle after Judas to fill Judas's vacancy. We also read in Acts 12 of the death of James, the brother of Peter, and later the affirmation of James, the brother of Jesus, as an apostle. We also know of Paul and Barnabas being called apostles. These aren't lesser apostles. These aren't uh, these aren't a different office. They are apostles. And so this is what we see as apostolic succession, that there are new apostles called. So the question is, where do we get indication from either Jesus or the apostles themselves that the apostleship was meant to end? Not that it did, but that it was meant to, and that the authority to lead the church generally was to go to the bishops. Because what I see when I look at the bishops and the episcopate is that they were given oversight over a particular area, whereas the apostles had the oversight over the entire church.
Well,
So
yes, of course there is.
where do we read that the apostolic succession was to go to the bishops as far as oversight over the entire church? Where do we see anything regarding a magisterial bishop?
Okay, Pope Clement I is in the Bible. You do know that, and that's who came after Peter.
No. Traditionally speaking, he was the fourth pope.
Well, Still very close. One.
No,
And two, it actually does.
Clement was nearly 100 years after Peter.
Okay. Well, the letter, 100 years after Peter. Congratulations. Again,
So
far now
you're
2,000 years
over
after
I don't know
Peter.
how many at this point. So I'm
We are
trying
about
to
2,000 years after Peter, so I
well
think that is.
well, and again, in order for your claim to tradition to work, you have to actively ignore the tradition that was set up during the first 50 to 75 years of the church.
And what was that tradition?
Okay, so the hierarchical structures, you have Jesus at the head, the apostles, including new ones called whenever one dies. And
Apostolic
then,
right there.
so apostolic succession is a new apostle called to fill a vacancy left by a previous apostle. Not a bishop, an apostle.
By the way, the bishops and priests are considered the new apostles. You do know that, right?
Based on what?
Based off of Corinthians.
Where do we get?
Based off of the letter to the Corinthians.
From Clement?
You want me to read the letter to the Corinthians?
Where does Paul indicate that the priests are the new apostles? Where does he say that?
So I will read this. I don't know if this is Pope Clement I speaking or if this is genuinely from the letter to the Corinthians, but they do.
I mean, what we have is as First Clement is strictly to the Corinthians. So if you're reading from First Clement, it would be to the Corinthians. But Clement was not an apostle, even by his own admission. So if you're going to appeal to Clement, that's not going to work because he was not an apostle.
Okay, but it's in the Bible.
Wait, First Clement is in the Bible?
Okay, no, First Clement is not in the Bible.
Okay, so
the letter to the Corinthians in the Bible.
Yeah, who traditionally wrote that letter?
Which letter?
Either one from to the Corinthians. Which what we have in the biblical text. Who wrote that?
Paul.
Okay, so why were you appealing to First Clement?
I'm not appealing to First Clement.
You were, because nowhere within Paul's letter to the Corinthians does he state that the priests are the new apostles.
Okay, yeah, of course he doesn't say that straight up.
There's not even an insinuation of it. You're reading something into the text that isn't there.
I don't even know what your argument is.
I am looking for something within the text, like something written by the apostles directly, whether that's included in the biblical text or something that was written by them that may not necessarily be considered part of the biblical text, that would indicate that the apostleship was meant to end and that the authority to lead the church generally, as the apostles did, was to go to the bishops, and that there was supposed to be a magisterial bishop. Or that the seat of the church was supposed to be in Rome.
Okay, so first of all, Peter went to Rome. That's
yeah,
pretty
that
well
doesn't mean
documented.
that the seat of the church. Yes, just because Peter went to Rome doesn't mean the seat of the church was meant to be there.
Well, no, but I don't think that the place of where the seat of the church is really matters.
The place of his well, it does, because why would the seat of where he was executed be now the seat of the church?
Because he was the first pope, and he was literally Jesus' messenger.
Based on what? Based on what? Where are you getting that?
Matthew 16:18, dude. I think I'm sure you've heard that so many times.
I have, and that's not declaring Jesus a pope, or not Jesus, Peter a pope, or a magisterial bishop. It's not even declaring Peter a bishop in that passage. In fact,
well, Peter also speaks for Jesus without him even being there. So this is not.
So does Paul. So does John. So does Philip. So do take your picks of any of the James.
No, they don't. No, they don't. Peter.
Okay.
No.
Why didn't Peter lead the Jerusalem Council? Why did James lead the Jerusalem Council?
Never heard of that.
Acts 15.
Okay, I'll pull it up right now.
James the Just, or sometimes called James the brother of Jesus, led the Jerusalem Council.
I'll read it right now.
Okay, go ahead.
And this still does not prove your argument.
Well, so far you haven't really made one that's stuck, so I'm not sure how much you're hoping for.
I mean,
But
also in your book,
go ahead and read Acts
I
15.
mean, in your Book of Mormon, people can also be God. So, you know.
No, it doesn't.
Oh, no, it doesn't? It doesn't
No,
say that.
The Book of Mormon does not say that. No.
Yeah, it does, dude.
Okay, I mean, you're welcome to
Stop.
pull up a copy of the Book of Mormon and look it up. Look, where does it say that specifically in the Book of Mormon? Have you read it?
I have.
Okay, so where does it say in the Book of Mormon specifically? Because that was the claim you made. Where does it say that we can become God? Where does it say that?
I don't remember it off the top of my head.
In other words, you haven't read it. Do you know where we get that
In other
doctrine
words, I
about
don't.
becoming like God?
In other words, I don't study Mormonism.
In other words, you've never read it. You just lied. In fact,
No, in other words, I didn't
you have all the
lie.
Latter-day Saints in the comments laughing at you for that comment, man. You've been shown to be a liar. So I'll tell
All
you
the
one thing. Where we get the doctrine of becoming like God isn't from the Book of Mormon. It's actually from the Bible, believe it or not. When we read Romans 8, for instance, when we talk about us being joint heirs with Christ, well, the question is, what is Christ heir of? Well, Hebrews 1, if we were to say that, especially since traditionally speaking, the writer of Romans is the same writer as Hebrews, Hebrews 1 states that Jesus is the heir of all things. So if we are co-heirs with Christ, if we are obedient to him, it means that we inherit the same things that he does. In fact, Jesus himself even gives the same promise to the Laodiceans, where he says that those, in Revelation 3, where he says that those who overcome as he overcame, him will he grant to sit in his throne, just as he sits in his Father's.
I don't
That's where
even
we
know
get
what
that
you
from.
just said.
So, in other words, you not only know you don't only know what's in the Book of Mormon. You don't know what's in the biblical text.
I don't know what's in the Bible.
No, you don't. I just gave you three verses from the Bible that
So,
showcase be receiving what Jesus has as far as his glory and his dominions.
so I actually just pulled up Doctrine and Covenants 132.
Okay, is Doctrine and Covenants the Book of Mormon?
I don't know. Again, I just
No,
told
the
you.
answer is no. The
I
answer
just
is
told
no.
you. I don't
Your
study
claim
your
was the
religion.
okay. So, no, but it's clear you don't even study your own. So I'm going to say this, and
Oh,
then I'm going to
I
drop you.
don't study my
You
own
don't
religion.
you don't even know what's in the biblical text, dude. So I'm going to say this, and I'm going to drop you. First, if you're going to come up and try to claim a few things, you might want to know what's actually in the biblical text first and foremost, because none of what you brought up actually lines up with what the text actually says, much less the context of which
Yeah,
it was
by the
given.
way, Acts 15
Secondly,
actually proves the papacy, but okay.
Acts 15, Peter was not leading the council, so nice try.
Clearly, where does it say that Peter was not running the council? Even if he wasn't running the council.
Who made the final call as far as the concept of circumcision among the Gentiles? Who was it that made the final call? It wasn't Peter.
Oh, yeah, it was.
No, it wasn't.
He was the one that even gave them the idea that they didn't need to be circumcised to
Okay,
begin with.
who's the one who declared that circumcision was no longer necessary at the close of the council? At the end of the council, who did it? Because if Peter was the one leading, if Peter was the one in charge, he would have had the last word, but he didn't.
He did have the last word.
He did not.
He was the one that gave. He was the
Read
one
on.
that gave
Keep
them the
reading.
idea. You want me to pull this
No,
up?
P-Day. Before it talks about Judas and Silas being called as prophets and sent to Antioch, who had the last word regarding the council?
I'm telling
It
you.
wasn't Peter. It was James.
I'm telling you, Peter was the only one. Peter's the
Okay.
reason that they knew that circumcision was not
Well, Peter
necessary.
originally fought against it until he actually came to Paul's side. But again, read what it says about who
I,
had the last word in the Jerusalem council. It wasn't Peter.
which verse? Tell me.
I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, but it's right before it talks about Judas and Silas being called as prophets.
It's because I'm looking at the entirety of Acts 15, and I have yet to see anything.
All right, let me see here.
Then the apostles and elders with the whole church decided to choose some of their own men and send them to Antioch with Paul and Barnabas.
Okay. All right. So, starting in verse 12, the whole assembly kept silence and listened to Barnabas and Paul as they told of all the signs and wonders God had done through them among the Gentiles. After they finished speaking, James replied, "My brothers and sisters, listen to me. Simeon has related how God first looked favorably on the Gentiles to take from among them a people for his name. This agrees with the words of the prophet, as it is written, after this I will return, and I will rebuild the dwelling of David, which has fallen, and from its ruins, and I will rebuild it, and I will set it up, so that all other peoples may seek the Lord, even all the Gentiles over whom my name has been called. Thus says the Lord, who has been making these things known from long ago. Therefore, I, James, have reached the decision that we should not trouble these Gentiles who are turning to God, but we should write to them to abstain only from the things polluted by idols, and from sexual immorality, and from whatever has been strangled, and from blood, and for in every city and generations past. Moses, as has had those who proclaimed him, for he has been read aloud in every Sabbath in the synagogues." The meeting ends there. It wasn't Peter who had the last word, it was James.
So, what does that prove?
That James led the Jerusalem Council. It wasn't Peter.
And how does that prove that?
In these types of councils, the ones who were leading it often were the ones who only got the last word. James was the one leading the council.
In what says that whoever says the last word, is the one that
you clearly don't know how things were in the ancient world.
I mean, you're clearly not giving me proof.
James literally said, "I have decided." Why was the decision up to James?
So are you a Mormon too?
No,
he's a Latter-day Saint. Yes,
ago.
He's a Latter-day Saint.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, he's a Latter-day Saint. He's not a Mormon. He's a Latter-day Saint. But anyway,
right. Mormon died a long time ago.
Yeah. But where does say James? What'd you say?
James was the one who literally said, "I have made the decision." It wasn't Peter's decision; it was James's.
Verse 19, he says, "Therefore I have decided." So why was the decision up to James?
Okay, James. That's not saying that James was the one that made the decision necessarily. That's just James giving them.
What?
Is that funny? That's funny.
It is funny because you are literally trying to change the context.
Dude, that's James. That's James giving
James
his opinion.
No, he's saying, "I've made the decision." The person who can only make the decision regarding the outcome of the council is the one who's leading it. He would not be able to make a decision regarding it because then the meeting ends.
So you say verse 19 versus, "It is my judgment, therefore."
Not in charge. If James
it is
was not in charge, why would it include that he had the final say and the final decision? Why would that even matter? If it wasn't up to James, why would they even include that?
So verse 19, which says, "It is my judgment, therefore, that we should not make it difficult for the Gentiles who are turning to God." That's what verse 19 says.
Yes, he was the one that led the council. Most recent translations, based on the oldest text that we have available, say that it is now my decision.
Okay, just because he's saying that it's his decision doesn't mean that it's the decision of everybody.
That's exactly what it means. That is exactly what it means.
And why is that what it means?
Because, one, the meeting ends, okay? There's no indication of whether or not Peter said that he had to agree or provide his authority to say that this was now binding.
No, because they all probably agreed because Peter said it.
Peter didn't say it until before Paul said anything. Again, the way
that
you're adding things work,
texts that aren't there.
Yeah.
The text says that at the very end, James says, "I have reached the decision," and you are trying to imply, even though it doesn't say, you're trying to imply that he's saying that because Peter said that.
Yes,
That's
because
that's
not
not what the
everything
text
is
says.
said in the
So
Bible
you're
word for word.
adding stuff to the text that isn't there.
No, I'm simply
We're going
interpreting the
based off of what
Bible.
the no, we're going based off what the text says. The text does not
Okay,
say what
so
they're
can
trying
you
to make
show
it
me
say.
if you're not adding to what the text says, can you show me the verse that says Peter said, "I've made the decision"?
Okay, yeah. Peter literally gave that again. He was the one that gave them this
This
idea.
also go well,
So
hold
that's
on, because
clearly him
Paul
making his
hold on.
decision.
Because Paul also because this also goes against what Paul says to the Galatians later on when he writes to them, when he says he got after Peter for going against the council, for eating with the Gentiles, and then being ashamed when he got confronted by the Judaizers.
So what did they do? I didn't hear you.
The entire point of the Jerusalem Council was to determine whether or not things like kosher rules and circumcision was still in effect. And that was the decision they came to, that it was not. And yet, even after this point, Paul relates an experience that he had with Peter when they were in Antioch, when Peter was eating with the Gentiles, and then later tried to cover his tracks when confronted by the Judaizers, members of the church who still believed that the law of Moses was still in effect.
So can I just read you verses 7 through 11 right now?
That doesn't change who had the final word, but go ahead.
Okay, I'm done with you and talk about the final word because that
The
has
final word
absolutely
is what
nothing.
important. The
Because
final word is what is important, though, Fide, because again, the final word is
yeah,
reserved
that
for the
has
one who is
nothing to
leading
do
the meeting.
that has nothing to do with whether or not Peter was the leader of the council or not.
That has
So let me
absolutely everything to
see.
do with who is the leader of the council. The one who leads the council has the final word. That's even in effect today. This is not something that's new.
And
This
again,
is
it's
something that has
still
existed since the ancient world.
even if it did, it's still not saying that he had the final word.
Are you trying to imply that Peter, since Peter was the first one to stand up and talk about it, that he was leading?
No, I'm implying that because of the fact that after much discussion, Peter was the one that got up and addressed them.
Okay,
And
how does
again,
that
since
Peter's
we
in
want to
charge?
talk about what we see at
So where
councils,
how does that indicate that Peter was the one who was leading the council?
because again, after this, the entire assembly fell silent
No,
after
the
he
assembly
said this.
fell. No, the assembly fell silent after Paul and Barnabas spoke.
It says as they listened to Barnabas and Paul. Clearly, after Peter said this, the entire
Yeah,
assembly fell
but
silent.
okay, when you're trying to hear someone speak about the miracles that were wrought among the Gentiles, like they didn't go silent simply because of what Peter spoke. They were going silent because of what Peter and or what Paul and Barnabas were saying.
Verse
So, what were
7
Paul
is
and
not
Barnabas saying?
They
verse
were
7
talking
is
about the miracles
not
that were wrought
saying
among the Gentiles.
verse 7 is not saying Peter stood up and took charge and was in charge. Verse 7 is literally just saying that Peter is making his point. After much
So
discussion, Peter
why?
stood up and made
So
his
tell me
point.
this. No, tell me this. So that if that is all that you believe, why then is Peter one of the only ones that actually, one of the only two, I think, that actually have their opinion in this text?
Well, this
None
account
of the
was
other
written several
apostles
years
have their
later.
opinion. None of
Okay,
the other
so
apostles have their opinion.
yeah, okay, so who traditionally wrote the Book of Acts?
Don't know. I couldn't tell you. I don't.
Okay, traditionally speaking, it was Silas, or also Luke, right? Okay, so
So Luke,
who was Luke?
so
Who was Luke
so
around?
the
Who was
gospel
Luke
writer
around
Luke,
primarily?
the
Yes,
gospel writer Luke, who can
traditionally
not
speaking,
use.
yes. We don't
Okay,
we,
there you
we
go.
don't know for sure. We don't have like the author's not identified, but traditionally speaking, it's Luke. All right. So who was Luke primarily around?
Peter.
No,
I don't. So who?
Luke. Okay, who does Acts primarily focus around, especially after chapter 9?
Couldn't tell you.
Paul. Luke was Paul's traveling companion, his proselyting companion, if you will.
So why does this matter? I don't know what you're trying to say.
So if Paul is the one who is relating this experience to Luke, why would any of the other apostles be brought up if the main crux was primarily between him and Peter? Peter did
Because even
eventually
in
come to the agreement,
we see this
but
in
go ahead.
we see this today. Even we need to know what the other, for example, at a church council, all of the bishops vote on whether a document is going to be passed or not. It's not just one person. Everybody votes on whether or not a
Again,
document
we're
is going to be
talking we're
passed.
talking about a document that was written decades later, at the earliest.
Again, I don't know what your affinity is with talking about how long ago these things happened, but
Because context matters. I know you're allergic to context, but it matters.
No, I'm not
Because
allergic to
you're the one
context.
making the historical claim.
I have no clue what you guys are talking about.
The historical claim matters, and if we're going to make a historical claim, we need to understand the history. So if we're going to understand the history, that plays into the context of what is being said and when.
Okay, can I ask a clarifying question? Are you trying to cast doubt on the idea that a Council of Jerusalem occurred, or cast doubt on the details as Luke records them, to bring in a gap of time between the composition and the events?
The other guy made the point that Acts chapter 15, it was 15. Yes, Acts chapter 15
Acts
proves
15.
that Peter, he was saying that Acts 15 proves that Peter was the first pope. We're just pointing out that Acts 15 does no such thing.
I still don't understand how you actually think that because of the fact that it is cut off after the final,
If Peter was the one who was leading
after
the
James
council,
spoke,
after when Luke was writing this account based off of what Paul is telling him, it would have been important to note who was leading the council. And if Peter was the one leading, he would have had the final word. And yet, the writer goes out of his way to point out that James had the final word.
It seems pretty clear
where
that
does it
if,
say that?
if
Where
the
does it
point,
say that
it
James had the
seems,
final word?
dude,
I
we
just
already
read
showed
those
you.
verses. We showed you already, Fide.
Okay, it doesn't say that James had the final word.
Well, it does say that. No, it literally does say that. It says
It
that
really
James
does.
is the one who made the decision. It shows
If it
James
literally
is the
does,
word.
then show me where.
James was the one. James was the one who made the decision of the Jerusalem Council. That is what the
It
text
seems
says.
pretty clear that if
No,
Acts
Peter
chapter
made the
15,
decision.
hey, quit interrupting
No,
me. If Acts chapter 15 is supposed to be portraying that Peter is the first pope, it would show Peter saying, I have made the decision. It's not doing that. It's not
because he
showing
would have
Peter
been the
in a place
magisterium.
of papal superiority.
It
He would have had the
really does
magisterium at the
not
time.
need to.
It literally does.
In a different way.
Oh,
That
yeah,
might be helpful.
it does not need to. I don't know why you guys think that.
So in order, because that's exactly what the text is insinuating. That's exactly how those things were handled in the ancient world. And so if
So
you're
now,
trying to say that this is saying what it doesn't, oh, I'm sorry, but again, you didn't even know that the Jerusalem Council was a thing when we started this conversation.
it literally does need to say that because you are making the positive claim. You're saying that Acts 15 proves that Peter was the first pope, but now you're saying it doesn't need to say that. How can it say that and
It
not
doesn't need
say
to. I
that?
mean, it doesn't need to say word for
So if
word.
it does,
He had the final say.
Yeah, it absolutely does though, because if he had the authority and if he was the leader of the council and therefore had the final say of what was going on in the church, then the text would say as much. But Paul goes out of his way to tell Luke that it was James who was leading it.
I wouldn't say that it needs to. I don't know why you think
Okay,
this.
so this again, you're contradicting
You
yourself.
just keep
now.
saying that it would need to, but you're not giving me a genuine reason.
And yet you previously said, like Josh pointed out earlier, that this proves the papacy, and yet it doesn't.
It does.
How?
Because Peter.
Where does it say that Peter had the authority to make the final call? Where does it say that? Where does it even insinuate?
Oh my gosh!
Where does it even imply it? Where does it imply it? I'm waiting. Where's the implication?
I'm making you mad, dude. But no, it's
because you're going.
Oh, it's not.
Because
but you're sitting here like,
where
does it apply it? Where does it apply it?
Well, it makes sense to get frustrated when you make claims about the Bible
that has nothing to be there. Especially given the fact that you had no idea.
You guys don't even believe that. You guys don't even believe the Bible is infallible. Why does it matter that much?
They didn't believe. They didn't even believe that that scripture was infallible. What are you talking about?
Oh, that's hilarious. That now you just try to shift the goalposts.
Yeah,
now you're shifting because you can't substantiate your own claims.
You know, if you would just let me read Acts 7
we
through 11.
We read it. It has nothing to do with who made the final call.
We didn't. We never read it.
Just because Peter made his point does not mean that James didn't make the final decision. Why are you trying to say that verses 7 through 11 trump over
the level of obtuse is
I'm saying
astronomical?
I'm saying this because Peter was the one that even popped the idea in their head. Peter was the one that headed this entire thing. He was the one that headed this entire effort.
That's not what the text says. That's not what the text says. If that were the case, then Paul contradicts that.
It says that there was lots of discussion and debate before Peter even talks.
What do you mean?
Okay, if that is your claim, hold on, Fide, wait. If that is your claim that it was Peter who put this idea in their heads, then it is contradicted by Paul in his letter to the Galatians.
What does it say in the letter to Galatians then?
That Paul called Peter out for
what verse? I need the verse.
So I want to say it's in chapter 2. Again, I'm going off the top of my head here.
So verse 6 of 15 negates your claim, because verse 6 literally says that they were talking and debating this matter. And then verse 7 says, after they had been talking and debating, Peter stands up to make his claim.
Okay, yeah. This is about him eating with the Gentiles that weren't circumcised.
Here's the problem, is you keep making claims that you just say, this is implied, this is just there. We are reading what the actual text says.
Yeah, and you can't just read it word for word
say... You can't just read the Bible?
You can't just read it word for word and say that everything
I would
that you need to take everything at face value.
Okay, so based on the catechism, where do we get that Peter was leading the Jerusalem Council? Based on the catechism, where do we see that?
So I don't know if that's covered in the catechism or not, because that is an extremely trivial argument, because there's way more that proves the papacy, by the way, but I don't want to get into it, all of it.
Okay, here's the issue, okay? Acts 15 does not show Peter, it does not affirm the papacy. In fact, Peter was not leading it. Even Catholic scholars would appeal to that. And if you're trying to say that it was Peter that put this into their minds, go ahead and reread Galatians. And Josh, if you wanna look this up, I want to say it's in chapter 2, where Paul is the one who gets after Peter in Antioch for kowtowing to the Judaizers.
So I'm actually pulling up a direct off from the catechism, refuting your argument.
Okay, so where does it insinuate in the catechism that in Acts 15 Peter was leading the council?
So Christ instituted Peter as the head, and that's believed in Catechism of the Catholic Church 880. Peter's successor as the Bishop of Rome. the perpetual invisible source and foundation of the
Where
unity.
does it talk about the Jerusalem Council?
Okay, I'm gonna pull it up for you if you would give me 2 seconds.
Because I ask you a question.
Just get to the point. Just get to the point about where it says in the Jerusalem Council.
Well, you asked me.
Don't pontificate. Just go where it says about the Jerusalem Council.
Okay, you asked me to pull up where it says it in the Catechism, and I'm pulling it up right now.
I am asking where it says in the Catechism that Peter led the Jerusalem Council. Go ahead, Josh. Shady, sorry. Go ahead.
Galatians 2:11, by the way, Lion, is what you were.
Gotcha. Thank you. Yeah, what were you going to say, Shady?
I was going to ask him, when did the Council of Jerusalem occur?
What do you mean?
When did it take place?
Somewhere, I don't know off the top of my head, but I'm going to assume anywhere between
the mid-50s.
I was going to say anywhere between the 50s
somewhere
and
between
60s.
48 to 50. 48 to 50 is what most scholars agree. When did Peter first begin his ministry in Rome?
Don't know.
Much later. So your argument that what was happening at the Council of Jerusalem solidifies your argument that he was the Pope. Peter hadn't even arrived in Rome at this point in time. Peter was still serving his mission in the Mediterranean when the Council of Jerusalem occurred, and he had to return to Jerusalem for the council. He hadn't even made it to Rome yet. So how would he be the head of the Catholic Church in Rome?
He did not need to be in Rome to be the Pope.
There was no established head of the church in Rome at that time.
I don't think there was either.
Do you want to know who was the established head of the Church of Jerusalem at the time of the council?
Sure, go ahead.
James the Just. Hence the reason why James presided over the council in Jerusalem, because he was the head of the Church of Jerusalem at the time the council occurred. Now, do you want to know why they respected his decision-making on this specific topic as well? Do you know why James was so revered when it specifically came to this topic?
Go ahead. I'm not planning on believing anything that you're trying to sell me, but
maybe we should do some research into the Bible and
I don't believe the false doctrine of Mormonism.
This isn't doctrine of Mormonism.
All we've been doing is talking about what's in the biblical text.
And this is scholarship as well. But James was the head of the church in Jerusalem. But part of the thing was they were what were they discussing at the Council of Jerusalem? What was the major topic?
Mosaic law.
Mosaic law. Do you know which of the apostles was probably the most adherent to Jewish law?
No, I couldn't tell you. I don't pay attention to Jewish laws.
So you understand that Christ adhered to Jewish law, right?
You just said that James adhered the most to Jewish law.
Yeah,
he would have understood Jewish law the best.
James was known for very strict observance of Jewish law. Now, if you don't understand the difference between being a practicing Jew and being a Jewish Christian, they still adhered to specific Jewish laws. And James was probably the one that practiced the most strict observance to Jewish law during that time frame. Hence the reason why his opinion on the topic as to whether or not the Gentiles needed to be circumcised to be welcomed into the house of God was so well respected. But again, the main reason is he was the head of the Church of Jerusalem at the time. Therefore, he presided over the Council of Jerusalem, which is why it is very well laid out there in the scriptures. He was given the last word and the decision-making power over the decision. Yes, there was an argument. There was arguments that were made by Paul and Barnabas and Peter, right? They all interjected their 2 cents worth into it. But at the end of the day, James, who presided over the council, made the final decision.
Again, I still do not.
The Bible, scholarship.
Okay, can I talk? Also, you say that James was the most adherent to Mosaic law. How come then, after Peter addresses the council, it says his belief, then James comes and speaks up and says,
you're missing that. You're missing a crucial essence. Here, hold on. Fide, you're missing something very crucial here. The text doesn't say that James was the one who spoke up right after Peter. James didn't speak until after Paul and Barnabas did.
Yeah, Paul and Barnabas weren't talking anything about Mosaic
It
law.
go,
They were
it,
just
yeah,
talking about the signs and wonders
yeah, but the
God
thing
did.
is, yeah, that was part of their argument, was that the signs and wonders among the Gentiles show that they didn't need to do circumcision anymore. That circumcision was not necessary. That was their point. That was the
So
entire point of it all.
how come James says in verse 14, Simon described to us how God first intervened to choose a people for his name from the Gentiles? And he says that Simon
Because at that
is the one
point, yeah,
that...
because at that point, Peter had finally come around. Because the only way that the decision could be made and have any kind of binding effect on the church was if the
Okay,
apostles were all in agreement.
and then he
If
goes
it was
on to...
unanimous.
He goes on to say the words of the prophets, and then he says, "It is my judgment, therefore, that we should not make it difficult for the Gentiles
Yes,
to return
my
to God."
judgment as the leader of this council. Thank
Oh,
you.
I
You very
didn't
much
know he
agree.
said,
Thank
"It
you
is
very
my
much.
judgment, therefore, as I am the leader of this council." Like,
I'm glad we can come to an
Not
agreement because
James
now
speaking.
now we can agree that it was James's judgment that made it binding. Thank you very much. We're bringing up the
no,
next.
James's judgment actually.
Oh my goodness.
You know, there are some points where I can kind of see the Catholic and Orthodox claim if you squint really hard. The problem is that in this particular case, even squinting can't take away what the text actually says. How anyone can ultimately claim that Acts 15 justifies the papacy of Peter is beyond me. It goes against historical documentation and even goes against what the text itself says. So obviously Acts 15 is not the right proof text to go. So what do you guys think? Any Catholics that hate watch here, what other text within the biblical canon would you use in order to justify the papacy of Peter?